I think this is one of the final panels of what I think has just been a terrific forum. Jay, thank you so much. And I think it's appropriate that this panel have one of the final opportunities to share some thoughts. In the words of our great former President Theodore Roosevelt, he gave what I consider to be an iconic speech about the man in the arena. The gentlemen here I consider to be in the arena. Each one of them is in public service in the government of their respective countries, dealing with the energy sector, where they have to come to grips every day with the many forces and pressures and balances that are required in developing good policy. There in your program, we had a late ad with Drew Leyburn, who is from Canada, but it's not my job to talk. It's their platform to share their views on the global implications of North American energy. And I've asked them to look at it from the standpoint of what were some of the key takeaways that have been discussed during the forum, and what should be the top of mind issues as we go forward into this new future for North America. And I would like to go in country alphabetical order, and Canada will begin.
Thank you. We're first in English, French, and Spanish when it comes to alphabetically. When it comes to energy, the world needs more North America. That's kind of the theme of what I've picked up over the last couple of days. I think that sentiment was echoed by Secretary Rice at the outset of the forum. I think we've got a model that's emerged over many years, but I think is set to be strengthened over the next decade or so, where we've got our house in order in a way that no other region in the world can claim. And I think that as a model, it can be exported. I think it can be expanded, and it can be seen as an example for others. And that has implications geopolitically, of course, for how energy is managed throughout the world. Just in terms of having our house in order, as has been mentioned, we've got about 20% of the world's oil. We've got about a quarter of the world's natural gas. In other things that you can export, like reactors and uranium, we're also world leaders. We have oil and gas production and energy production in every type of terrain and geology that you can imagine. We have the Arctic, we've got fracking and development and hydro development happening in hinterlands and remote areas. Again, a model that can be extrapolated and shared with others. And we're also leaders in areas like energy innovation, where we heard yesterday some of the technology areas where there's a lot of promise, but also where Canada, US, and Mexico are at the forefront. CCS is a good example of that. Fracking is, of course, in its own way, an innovation that's revolutionizing the world. And in electricity as well, we talked yesterday about high voltage DC lines. In fact, maybe many of you may not know that the world's first multi-terminal HVDC line actually runs from Quebec to Massachusetts. We also have some of the world's best regulatory systems, something that may not get enough attention, but when it comes to the promotion and protection of the environment, of safety and security, we are world leaders as a continent. We do it in a transparent fashion that I think, again, is a model for others. And when we're at our best, energy trade is as seamless as it is anywhere on the planet. And so, again, these are great attributes that I think are exportable, are a model for others. But I think we can't afford to get too self-congratulatory, however. There are some challenges we all face together. In our own ways, we're all having issues getting oil to tidewater. We have a climate change challenge ahead of us, like every other region of the world, and we'll need to continue some heavy lifting to meet our 2020 and post-2020 efforts. We're all struggling with issues of social license or public confidence in getting our populations to find consensus around the need for energy development. And our neighbors in Mexico have some very promising but uncertain years ahead of them as they implement their very promising, as I said, reforms. Luckily, I think that there are some collective solutions that that we can work on together to face these challenges and to lighten the load for each of us. And that can be brought about by some government-to-government collaboration, and we've already talked about that a little bit, whether it's between our regulators, sharing standards and best practices, whether it's in science and technology and innovation and collaboration on that front. But I also think that there's an important role that government and institutions can help play in convening and bringing together more business-to-business dialogue, because ultimately, if we want the opportunities to be met across the three countries, there's lots of chance for dialogue and a lot of upside potential when that happens. And I want to thank the Forum for providing a venue for that kind of business-to-business dialogue. So I think I'll end it there and pass it off to Mexico alphabetically.
Before Guillermo begins, we will be taking questions, so if we could get the cards moving, we will take questions, and I think we'll have time to do that. Guillermo.
So thank you for the panel. I think this is a very good discussion that we started in the morning, and this is a good place to wrap up what we have seen throughout the forum. I think that there has been good conclusions on how we should strengthen the energy security integration between our countries and the collaboration. We also have a good understanding on how government-to-government talks have to be fluent and have to be permanent if we want this powerhouse to become a reality. And number three is we need our companies to meet. No? There are good examples of technology mixed with knowledge of the culture and the laws, and we think that we will have a nice environment in all of our countries to receive companies from the other parts and to become partners at the level of the business. I would like to stress that we need to have more cooperation on the perspective of our countries as a whole. We need to know where are we going in the next 5 years, the next 30 years. We sometimes add up what we see as a sole country to what the other countries are seeing, but I think that we need a perspective, an integrated perspective of the three nations so that we can achieve the goals that we put as a region. We need responsible and sustainable best practices in the development of the natural resources. We know as Mexicans that we need to learn a lot from the best practices of Alberta and of Colorado, for instance, as an example of non-conventionals. We think that this sharing of experiences will help us move faster than what you have achieved in some years. And last, we think that we need the infrastructure to move the energy. We are focusing a lot on the producing side, but we need the midstream and the downstream infrastructure put in place so that as a backbone, we can move things from where they are produced to the place that they are consumed. Thank you. That will be all.
Thank you, Guillermo. Jonathan?
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here. The top-of-mind observations that I would offer are the following three. First, that this indeed is a time of opportunity, a time of plenty, and that's been a core observation of all of the discussions in the last day and a half, but not only in oil and gas. More on that in a second. Second observation is that notwithstanding the fact that it is such a time of opportunity and such a time of plenty, there is important further work to do. And some of the elements of this are those points that my colleagues have already commented on, either choices that we are required to make as we manage this time of plenty, or hard work that is needed if we are to realize the benefits in our three countries. The third top-of-mind observation I have is that there are huge implications that stem from what we've been discussing over the last day and a half, and that have an impact on how North America interacts with other parts of the globe, but also how the Western Hemisphere itself is positioned more broadly, not just North America, but also other parts of our hemisphere. So just briefly to touch each of those three ideas again. In terms of this time of opportunity, the incredible story of what has happened in the unconventionals, in the oil and gas space, chiefly because of unconventionals, is a well-known point. But I think we should also keep in view the incredible dynamism that is underway in other parts of our energy sector, whether one is talking about energy innovation and research and development. To Drew's point about carbon capture, utilization, and sequestration, there are opportunities for our three countries and for companies in our countries to help move forward that suite of technologies, which, as we heard yesterday, is so important to finding a solution that works globally for the climate problem. It's also worthy of note that clean energy deployment, which is something that we heard about yesterday, whether from the New York State vantage point or from the perspective of Dr. Arvizu from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, this is an area where, again, we've got huge opportunities underway, and indeed very, very strong collaborations that are taking place in a trilateral framework between and among the United States, Canada, and Mexico, and then also our three countries collaborating through mechanisms such as the Clean Energy Ministerial, where one of the topics that we are focusing on that we think is most important is called the 21st Century Power Partnership. What are the technologies and policies, what are the business models that can be applied to move forward in the power sector space? In terms of the work to do, many of you in the room will be aware of the Quadrennial Energy Review, which the U.S. government will be releasing publicly in the next couple of weeks. The QER, as we refer to it, is an idea that was recommended first by the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology. It is a White House-led assessment that will be done on a rolling basis going forward. The first edition of the QER focuses on our transmission, storage, and distribution segments. And I mention this because one of the headlines that will come out of the QER is that we have a great deal of work to do to catch up, so that our infrastructure catches up with the patterns of production and consumption that now exist in the United States that did not in decades in the past. So focusing on some of those gaps are a part of the work that we have to do. Another piece of the work that we have to do is to think hard about this North American frame. This interaction between and among our three countries is very important and full of potential, further potential, but there are also some embedded difficult questions that we have to think through. We have to be honest with ourselves about and think through with care. We talk about harmonization of regulatory structures, and certainly there's a lot of upside to be reaped from that? Yeah, I guess that's English, but to be taken from that. But there are also political sensitivities that we should acknowledge, we should be forthright about, and we should get into a serious-minded conversation about whether we're better off or worse, whether one jurisdiction is happy to change its structures, its legal structures in this way in order to find a more harmonized and business-friendly way of thinking about the energy sector. Last, in regard to the implications, the kind of geopolitical implications going forward, I would offer the following thoughts. The first is that obviously Mexico has entered into its energy reform, this historic set of changes that we've heard about through the last 2 days. Mexico has done that in response to its own assessment of its self-interest. Couldn't be more appropriate, of course. But we in the United States, and I have heard the same sentiment from Canadian officials as well, we are not indifferent to the success of that reform process. And so this is a point that we need to be thinking about. What Mexico's success in the job creation, the macroeconomic stabilization, the new opportunity has huge implications for that country, our neighbor, going forward. It also has huge implications in terms of serving as a potential model for other countries in the hemisphere. And so I think that this is a critically important piece for us to keep in view. Not everything that's going to happen in the hemisphere will be good news. One doesn't know what the future will be, for example, of the Petrocaribe subsidy program that has existed and has been a lifeline for a number of the countries in the Caribbean and Central America. Many analysts are suggesting that it's a matter of time before that instrument is no longer in place. And again, we have a stake in understanding, in helping those countries to find alternative ways of meeting their energy security needs. Last point that I'll make is the following. We can and we should talk about the implications that this North American story has for the geopolitics globally. I think that this is an essential part of this discussion. We shouldn't engage in that conversation, though, in my opinion, from a perspective that conveys the sense that it would be good for us to be disconnected from global markets. We are going to remain, each of our countries and North America jointly, part of the global energy sector, part of global oil markets. Try as we might wish to, what happens in terms of the trajectory, the disruptions, the opportunities globally will have implications for us. Now, the fact that North America is in this time of plenty certainly shifts the balance very interestingly. At a minimum, for all of our countries, it reduces our, what in the past was essentially a hemorrhaging of money overseas as we procured imported energy and fuels. So that conversation now has shifted. But let's not think about this from the perspective that somehow we would be better off to be separated from global markets. It's an illusion, and we won't get there. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And we have about 20 minutes for questions, so please bring them in and in filling the gap. Oftentimes, and I think throughout the conference, we talked about this time of plenty, to use Jonathan's words, and how that may affect some of what one might call the bad actors, the Venezuelas, the Irans, the Russias. But at the same time, there are good friends that are affected by things that will be happening in North America. So, Jonathan, if you could take that on. Guillermo, obviously when Mexico was going through the reform process and you had a significant role in how that was shaped, how were you looking beyond North America in that regard? And Drew, if you could simply talk about Canada's view, for example, toward what will be a huge energy demand coming out of Asia in the coming decades. So, Jonathan, to you first.
Thank you. The effect on bad actors, to use your term, is one that is important and complicated. I highlight the following few elements of the picture. A friend of mine says that it's for net energy producers and substantial energy producers, it's always easy to look like you have brilliant policy when oil's at $100 a barrel or more. That reality has changed. Now, what hasn't changed is that oil is a cyclical market, and there will be responses. There will be responses that are different, have a slightly different texture, that reflect the emergence of unconventionals into the picture in the United States. But certainly the market power that was enjoyed by some of the countries you referred to looks a little different today than it did 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 8 months ago. And that must affect the calculus of some of those countries. Now, it is equally true that for other countries that are big energy consumers, this time of lower cost options in each one of the segments of the energy sector, including in the oil and gas sector, brings benefits as well. Not without complexity, because as was noted yesterday, one of the clouding effects around this silver lining has been the loss of jobs in the oil and gas industry in this country, but on net, lots of short-term beneficial. It's some breathing space for allies and friends, even as it is a time of some greater pressure on those who would attempt to use energy as an instrument for political gain.
I would like to comment on your question on how did we saw the reform in a more global context. And I would like to refer that we see energy as a means, not as an end in itself. We think that we have a very interesting manufacturing possibility. We have the population, the bond of having people that are quite young regarding other countries in the world, and having this nice competitive energy put into the arena in Mexico gives us the platform to go and to achieve the placement of our products worldwide. We have the largest net of international commercial treaties throughout the world. So we have also both coasts. No? We can go to Asia, we can go to Europe, we can go to Africa. And we saw this reform as a possibility to have a more strong industrial and commercial facilities in Mexico. We are working also on our neighbors, on our south of the border neighbors on Central America. As a matter of fact, on Friday, there was a very important event in Mexico City in which the presidents of Mexico and Guatemala signed an agreement to promote the possibility of getting gas, natural gas. You know that Central America is very dependent on international commerce for their products. They have a very not cost-effective power generation. So the possibility of Mexico having more gas and Central America having also more gas through a pipeline that we will be building to the south of the border, that also gives us the possibility of extending the North America arrangement to the south of the border. So we think that we can have a powerful platform for commerce and also a powerful platform for giving development to other countries south of the border. Thank you.
Just to circle back to the question around whether this time of plenty could lead to a disengagement by North America from world affairs when it comes to energy. I think, to use Canada as a stark example, we historically have sent 98% of our energy one way to the U.S. This time of plenty in the U.S. and elsewhere has meant that it's given Canada an opportunity to think about looking at diversifying where it sends its energy. In fact, Canada does have plans to become more engaged as a result of this revolution in North American energy and supply and demand dynamics. We're actively planning the creation from the ground up of an LNG industry, export industry, on both our east and our west coasts to access Asian markets, European markets, even Indian markets from our east coast. We're actively looking at pipeline projects to move our oil to our east and west coast in reaction and reflection of the fact that we can't rely on a single customer anymore to the south with the new supply coming there. So I think that energy coming from Canada now that previously had been staying in North America will be displacing and competing with other forms of, or other sources from other countries. And as I said earlier, the model that Canada and North America and Canada, US, and Mexico together have for how we deal with energy politics, how we deal with energy regulation, is one that I think will have a soothing and smoothing effect to anyone who buys or works with us.
Thank you. The next question we could probably do a panel on, or indeed a full VGEF conference. And that is the issue of cybersecurity. And how are the countries looking at cybersecurity? Is it a priority, particularly the effect of protecting energy infrastructure? Guillermo.
Yeah, we understand that we need to address this topic, and we are having, you know, that there is technology for assessing these threats, and we have, as Pemex and as a country that has a lot of infrastructure and that has lived through some problems. In 2007, we had some of our infrastructure attacked by some groups in Mexico. It was no casualties at all, but it was something important because we got to have the center of Mexico with no gas for like 3 months, and that was something that we don't want to repeat. So we are working on intelligence, we're working on redundancy. I think that that's something that has to be addressed, because there's only one way to bringing in or taking out energy out of a country or within the country, then that's very vulnerable for security and safety problems. Huh? Thank you.
Jonathan?
So when our three ministers met in December of last year for the trilateral energy ministerial that I think Drew referred to in his remarks yesterday, one of the headline topics that was identified for future collaboration was the establishment of resilient energy networks, energy systems at a North American scale. And certainly cybersecurity and more broadly other forms of security of critical energy infrastructure is one of the topics that we think is very, very ripe for further engagement. We're at the start of that piece of our collaboration. I'll note in candor, but it is one has seen, I'll just cite press reporting that one has seen in the United States of the frequency of different kinds of attacks, cyber and other, on our energy systems. It certainly does not seem like that is a trend that appears likely to reverse itself quickly. So we think that there's lots of scope for further work there.
Great.
In 2003, of course, we had the blackout that took out a good part of our eastern seaboard, and both Canada and US served as a reminder of how linked our electricity infrastructure is, and the threats are cross-border ones if they do happen. And in response to that, one of the few truly North American quasi-regulatory entities that exist, the North American Electricity Reliability Corporation, was created, and it serves as kind of an overseeing body for not just Canada and US, but also northern Mexico. And it's also been doing a lot of work around reliability with regards to ability to respond to cybersecurity attacks.
Terrific. Another question that could probably dominate more than just our panel is, do you see water scarcity and frequent drought being a point of energy policy and trilateral collaboration?
I'm happy to start on that. Short answer, yes. This is a topic that another one of the topics that our three ministers touched on when they met. If anything, the problem that we have, I guess I'd turn my phraseology on its head and say that the problem we had in December was an embarrassment of plenty, right? Too many topics on which we feel that there is cause and call for greater engagement. This is a topic that is increasingly a point of focus, both as a matter of research agenda and as a matter of consideration of policy implications for the United States. We are also in multilateral fora, such as the Clean Energy Ministerial, focusing on that, and it was, again, one of the topics identified for further work. You know, and whether you're talking about research on very low water fracking or cooling technologies or high efficiency, high energy efficiency water treatment, the links back and forth between the energy and water pictures in our countries are very important for us to get our arms around.
Drew? The next set of questions really go back to how can the countries better cooperate, particularly on renewable technologies. The question was focused really on the United States and Mexico, and how can that be enhanced, facilitated, accelerated. But I'd like to start with Mexico, and then U.S., and then Drew, because I think it's part of all three.
One of the main challenges on renewables is the low price of oil. You know that most of renewable energy we had a lot of development of this industry with $100 barrel, but now that we are on the 50s or 40s in our case, we think that we need to jumpstart this energy, but as a policy. And in the reform, we introduced the renewables energy bonds, in which all of the generation in Mexico should have some percentage of their generation coming from renewables. For instance, if we have a fossil, a natural gas combined cycle facility, that company would have to buy some of the bonds that would be emitted by a renewable company. And that way, we think that we can internalize the incentive of doing the renewables without necessarily going directly to the cost, because we know that at present time, costs are still a little bit over what the fossil energy can provide. So we are very confident on this measure. We are willing to get 35 of our generation mix in the next 10 years. 35 will come from renewables. This is a very challenging goal, but we think that we can, having the sun or the wind and the geothermal energy available in Mexico, and with the private sector investing in those, we think that we can achieve it.
The next question is, as policy professionals, how do you see tax policy being used to drive shifts into cleaner, more efficient energy?
Well, as I said, this is policy. No, it's not a fiscal incentive, but it's something you have to do to provide the energy, and we really don't think we will be seeing a lot of subsidies in Mexico. We have a carbon tax, for instance. That's the other way to see it, that the more the emissions that some kind of energy has, the more tax it would have to pay. But we don't see a strong policy in subsidies. We have gone through the experience of Spain, for instance, trying to subsidize this energy. And there's a by-side effect that you have oversized capacity, no? And maybe you don't need it. If the economy doesn't grow as you thought it would be, then you have sparse capacity that the taxpayer is paying for. So we think more on market incentives, more on having this, to have this industry being built. No?
So, I mean, the comment was made yesterday in the renewable energy panel that focused on policies and markets, I think is the germane one to raise here, which is that in the United States, the investments in renewable energy technologies have not surprisingly seesawed up and down depending on what the fiscal treatment was in the marketplace. Some stability and predictability is a is something that certainly would provide a surer footing for investors, for system planners alike, and for the states that, for example, are trying to, the many states that are trying to manage their renewable portfolio standards as part of their mix.
In Canada, at the federal level, we have favorable tax treatment with regards to capital cost allowance for renewable energy. We have a program called Eco Renewable Power that provides incentives to clean power producers. I should mention, for those of you who don't know, that over 2/3 of Canada's electricity comes from renewable sources already, due largely to hydro. But we also have at the provincial level a series of incentives and different programs. The provinces are, of course, where most of the decisions around the pace and type of development for electricity and other forms of energy happen. And so in Ontario, for example, we have a feed-in tariff program. British Columbia, actually most provinces have some form of incentive program that's meant to attract further investment in renewable energy.
In the last minute that we have, two questions related to how well energy is understood in our countries. I think the last panel covered it wonderfully, but then the question that followed is, what should we as citizens do to make sure that we don't waste this opportunity that we see in front of us in North America? So your entreaties to the public.
Well, I from my side, found it very interesting the observation that Michael Dimick made at the end of his presentation this morning, that many of our challenging energy policy choices in the United States move forward more rapidly when they don't emerge so much into the public eye. I guess I would wish to interpret his comments as being that there's a difference between turning an issue into a whipping boy on the one hand versus fostering a deeper and broader, much broader engagement on energy policy issues in this country. I think we have a huge deficiency of an ability to think about trade-offs. And I said this morning, and we'll say again as a parting shot, that having this kind of an event that not only includes old farts like me, but also includes a bunch of students. We need you to be the next energy leaders, and these kinds of events, I think, are very important.
Any thoughts?
Maybe just to echo a bit of what John said, but in Canada, as I mentioned, public confidence issues are at the forefront for us as we think about the future of energy production. And the concept of energy literacy is a really important one. I think, to echo John, energy policy is largely around trade-offs. You can actually achieve almost any outcome you want with energy if you're willing to make supreme sacrifices on either side, whether it's environment, safety, economy. And governments have shown around the world, if they're willing to, they can do it. I think finding the right balance is really the issue. It's an issue that doesn't benefit from almost caricatured debate in terms of polarization. We're feeling that in Canada a little bit right now, where it's very hard to find the gray area between the black and white. And our role as governments and working with other institutions like universities, third-party organizations, and business itself is to see if we can get more of that nuance into the public discourse.
Guillermo, final word.
I think that we've done an exercise in all of our countries to try to get communities understand the benefits of energy. I think that that's a link that we have to give. The energy is not something ethereal, something that lives with you every day and every hour. And for instance, in Mexico, we have started communicating to people that regarding the new pipelines that we have built and the new facilities, combined cycle facilities to produce electricity, we have been able to reduce the industrial tariffs in 25%. So electricity is now cheaper now in Mexico than it was a year ago. And we want to transmit that. We need people to understand that the energy will make them live better and healthier lives. And for instance, we have people that still cook with with lodge, how do you call it? With fire, no? In the houses, with firewood, and they breathe out of that, and we have a very important health problem in somewhere in the north of the country, and having natural gas or having other sources of these fuels can make their lives better. So we have to communicate that, and that's something that has to be achieved, no? As a block.
Thank you very much. And before thanking the panel, I'd just like to remind everyone that there's a Tesla and transportation panel after lunch at 1:30. And now being a Tesla spokesman, I'll take either a red or a white one, whatever you want to give me. So if you'd thank the panel, please.